everyone. I'm Natalie Gawkner, and this is Both Sides of the Aisle. I represent the political center, and I'm so excited to be with my good friend Shireen Ghorbani on the left.
Hello. So happy to be here, and thanks to our listeners for tuning in. We have a special episode today. So with the elections right around the corner, I decided to reach out to the county clerk that I know the best, Lannie Chapman, to come in and talk a little bit about elections, but we want to know more about that. So thank you for joining us, Lannie. So happy to have you here.
Oh, it's so great to be here. Thank you very much.
So tell the listeners a little bit about just who you are, just a little bit about your background.
Sure. My name is Lannie Chapman. I was first elected in 2022. Prior to my election as the Salt Lake County Clerk, I was Sherry's right-hand woman for 4 years prior as her chief deputy.
So we have to pause and say Sherry Swenson was, I think, the longest serving
Legend
a true
in
legend.
the state, no matter your party.
Yeah. County clerk, and really did a lot to expand access to the ballot. A real champion for voter registration.
Yeah, I mean, wouldn't it be fair to say, and we'll get into a lot of this, Lannie, but that Utah is very different than a lot of states in terms of some of the modernization that we've done in voting and whatnot, and that Sherry led a lot of that.
Absolutely.
I just think of vote by mail, how we, that's dominant here in what we do, and apparently it's not well respected in other places.
Well, they don't have the history with it like we do. They don't have the good policies, procedures, and frankly, laws like we do. And Sherry was instrumental. 32 years in office, incredible woman. I still have lunch with her once a month. Love her to death.
Yes. Okay, so back to you. A little bit more about kind of your background and what you bring to the office.
Sure. So before being Sherry's right-hand woman, chief deputy and clerk, obviously, I was a civil attorney in the DA's office for Salt Lake County. I wrote a lot of contracts. I defended a lot of 1983 lawsuits. It was a fun job. Really loved it. So I bring that legal background to my career now.
Yeah, I bet. I mean, especially, right? It seems like an important skill set. What does the clerk's office do?
It's a really good question. Statutorily, it depends on the size of the county. So for a first-class county like Salt Lake County, the clerk is over marriage licenses. We act as a passport acceptance office. We do the minutes for the council meetings and any open meeting that needs to have minutes taken. And then, of course, draft them and put them online for dissemination publicly. And then the biggest part of the office, obviously, is election administration. We draft the ballot. We finalize everything. We tally it all.
County by county. I mean, you do Salt Lake County, but we have one in every county that's doing this.
All 29 counties have a clerk.
Help us understand that relationship between the county clerk's office and the lieutenant governor. We think of Deidre Henderson as our chief election officer, but I know that you are the soldiers in the field for the lieutenant governor.
Absolutely. So it's a really interesting position. Deidre Henderson is our election officer. Some states have a secretary of state. We have a lieutenant governor who oversees elections here in the state of Utah. She helps us with multi-jurisdictional or statewide races. Her office also provides guidance when it's needed. But overall, the 29 clerks, including myself, are all independently elected individuals that make sure that the laws are followed and elections are administered properly in their respective counties.
It's so interesting to me, Shireen, because you don't think of county clerks as the same way that you think of county commissioners or mayors or whatnot. But what an important function. And I love the thought that all 29 of them or even just 10 of the urban counties get together and sort of compare notes and talk about the business of government.
Yeah, I mean, it is a really critical role. And you mentioned the elections, but it also involves candidates, right? So candidates file and register with your office at the county level. If it's multi-county, there's some different procedures there, and then also disclosure. So the fundraising and finance component of it is also housed in the clerk's office. So there's so much.
It's interesting. For someone like me who's been in government so long, I always think of this as what the lieutenant governor does. But what I think I'm learning is that when it crosses county lines, or if it's statewide, similar point, it's up at the LG's office.
Yep.
But if it's within a county, you're you're doing the function,
Yeah,
that function.
it's
That's
myself and
interesting.
my peers, and there's a lot of races that are ancillary to counties
Yeah.
that we're handling.
So here's a question. Obviously you're biased, but when people are trying to evaluate their candidates, they're looking at candidates that are registered, show up on their ballot. Everyone has one. Not all of them are up this year, but half of them are. When you are looking at a county clerk, what kinds of questions do you think voters should be asking themselves?
Yeah. Well, first, do they believe in the system? I think that's always helpful to know to make sure that they're going to administer it properly and follow the laws that have been established by not just the state, but federally mandated.
Yeah.
As far as ensuring our friends and thank goodness for our military that's serving overseas, they have access to the ballot and their voice is counted just like our neighbors next door.
Yeah, it's an interesting thought to me because you hear the term spirit of the law and letter of the law. When it comes to elections, it's all letter.
It's all letter.
It's all letter, right?
Yeah.
Tell us how it works. I mean, if I receive my ballot, about 45 days before Election Day?
Close, 21 days.
Okay, 21.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And tell us how this works.
Sure. We will all active registered voters in Salt Lake County and, frankly, the state will receive a ballot on October 15th. That's 21 days before Election Day, November 5th. In that will be national races, federal races, all the way down to your local school board. And we've got a doozy, at least in Salt Lake County, as far as questions are concerned. Depending on which municipality you live in, you could have up to 3 questions. Plus, we'll all have 4 constitutional amendments this year.
Yeah, that's right.
Goodness. I didn't realize that. Can you name them, the constitutional amendments?
Absolutely. A, B, C, and D.
Yeah,
I mean, I know there's the one on the food tax and on
education funding.
The income tax earmark.
Yes.
And I know there's one on the redistricting issue in the Supreme
C.
Court.
So you've named A and D. B increases the funding for public schools from 4 to 5%. And then let me get my notes. C asks whether or not to have the office of county sheriff be elected by voters. So constitutionally, that's not required.
Okay.
Yeah.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
I mean, that it was on the ballot. So
Yes. So this is going to be a big one. It's certainly a big one in Salt Lake County. And I think anytime we have a national election, it feels...
And it's mail out, mail back everywhere in the state?
It is. So since 2020, we are primarily vote by mail.
Yeah.
However, that does not mean you need to use your by mail ballot. You have the opportunity to also vote in person if you'd prefer.
On the day of.
Or early. We have early voting too.
Yeah, I forget all
Throughout,
this.
the whole
So
state.
the whole idea is make it easy, get our voter participation rates up.
Accessibility is so important, and I think that's something here in Utah. We want to make sure that it is accessible for all eligible voters to have the ability to have their voices heard and a seat at the table.
Yeah. And so something I really appreciated about this in my experience on the county council is accessibility doesn't just mean any street that you happen to live on anywhere in the state, but it also means for folks with disabilities. And so I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about what kinds of accommodations. I know that you're able to get a ballot in Braille, is my understanding, or no, do we provide services to hear it?
Yeah, so there's a couple things we do. One, if you would prefer to vote in person, we have services on every single in-person voting machine throughout the county that has the ability to read it to you so you can securely and safely vote your own ballot independently. To add to that, last year, the Utah statute allowed us to do electronic voting for our overseas military voters, and then also those that fall within the ADA definitions of disabled. So those individuals receive an encrypted link to be able to independently use whatever software is on their device to vote it independently and return it to my office so they don't even have to go vote in person.
Yeah.
They have that opportunity.
Yeah, fascinating. So, Shireen, my mind is spinning with what kind of questions you might ask, and some of these are loaded, but do you have to be a citizen?
You do.
Yeah.
Do we have same-day voter registration?
We do.
Yeah.
Those are the right answers, I think, to those questions,
Yeah,
Shireen.
yeah.
Both you, Republican and Democrat, we're both agreeing
we
there.
like those answers.
Yeah.
It's so important. And that's one thing that we do. We always, as far as voter eligibility, of course, when a voter fills out a voter registration form, they're checking the box saying, yes, they are a U.S. citizen or naturalized, and then they're signing it under penalty of perjury. However, we take it a step further. We review the last four of the social that they provide us or the driver's license, and we have a relationship with the DLD to ensure that they are who they say they are.
And the DLD is the
driver's license division.
Yep,
Apologies.
that's right. No, that's okay.
Yes.
We have just about a minute left in this segment, but how does it all work when you count it? How do they get counted?
Oh, I feel like we have to talk about that in the second segment because there are a lot of
there.
Yeah, a lot of intricacies there.
There are many, many steps from receiving it to tabbing and removing the piece of paper that covers the voter signatures.
Yeah, the problems that you get when people put in 2 ballots in a single envelope.
Yeah, double stuffed.
Yeah, we got to talk about all of it.
So let's take a short break and we'll come back and we'll talk about how you count these. And then I want to get at some of the things about the peaceful transition of power, Shireen.
Sounds
what do you
great.
think? Lannie,
Yeah.
look good?
Absolutely.
Okay. I'm with Natalie Gochner. I'm with Lannie Chapman and Shireen Gorbani. Stay tuned, everyone.
You're listening to Both Sides of the Aisle on Utah Public Radio. We love to hear from listeners like you. If you would like to send us a comment, email bsotapodcast@gmail.com. That's bsotapodcast@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. Shireen Gorbani.
Lannie Chapman.
Natalie Gochner, and this is Both Sides of the Aisle. We are talking about elections, and so excited, Lannie, to have you here, the Salt Lake County Clerk. And we got a bunch of questions, but we want to walk through when you vote, how does the counting occur? And I think to a lot of people, this is a huge mystery.
Absolutely. And it shouldn't be. I encourage people to come down to my office, come take a tour. As a kid, I watched a lot of Mr. Rogers behind the scenes. I think it is so important for people to understand how we're doing what we're doing so that they feel safe in knowing that their vote counts.
Where does it happen? There's got to be a special room. We're talking Salt Lake County, but that's almost half our state's population.
There is a room where it happens. It's in the Salt Lake County Government Center.
Okay.
In the basement. It's a locked room. Only certain people have key access to it. It's under 24-hour surveillance. However, I encourage people to come take a tour, come observe, come check it out.
It's dangerous to ask these questions because you show your naivete, but it's electronically counted with some audits, or how does it work?
Yes. So every single election, we will have a logic and accuracy test prior to the election. That's going to check the accuracy of the scanners and the election machines that we're using to make sure that they are tabulating correctly and that everything's working as it should. Then, of course, we have the election. After the election, we have a post-election audit. Again, happens after every single election. We send up every single ballot batch of by-mail ballots and ICX, which is the in-person voting for Salt Lake County, machines that we use to the Lieutenant Governor's office. About 10 minutes before that audit starts, they tell us which ones we're going to audit. So it's a mad dash to go get all the stuff. However, we get it taken care of.
There'll be a randomization going on there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And we do a sample hand count using third-party individuals to come hand count. And I always encourage people to come check that out as well. We love to have observers at those. And sometimes we even pull them in to help us audit.
Sounds like America to me.
Yeah. Oh, speaking of people coming in to help, is it too late to be a poll worker? Is it too late to sign up for that?
Funny you asked, Shireen. It is not too late. We are always looking for people that have availability to come work at vote centers, both on election day, early vote. But if people have a little bit more time, we actually have job posts up right now for people to come answer phones, come actually help us administer the election. And if anybody speaks Spanish on top of that, that would be super helpful.
Now, I feel like we've talked a little bit about the audit. I want to jump kind of out of this. We'll come back to it for a second. But how do people get information? They get this big ballot. It's got all this stuff on it. In some cases, with their constitutional amendments, it will have very carefully crafted language to try to persuade voters one way or another. But there is a bigger voter guide that's available. Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. So the voter information pamphlet, which is what you're talking about, exists. It is housed on the website of the Lieutenant Governor's office. So le.utah.gov is a great resource. I go there daily. I will also have a link to it on my website. The slug or the shortened version of my website is slco.vote. Easy to find, easy to get to, and I'll have a FAQ, frequently asked questions, for the 2024 general that will include that.
Do you mail out the voter pamphlet as well, or is it all just online?
It's all online now. We do not mail them anymore.
It's interesting. I have mixed feelings about that.
Yeah.
It seems like that would be a reasonable government expense.
I agree with you. I'll say I have been on this a couple of times, and I can tell you with certainty the year that I ran for Congress, my opponent, who at the time was Chris Stewart, didn't submit. So I had a bio in there because we were on it and we got in it, and he did not submit at all. And I actually was kind of disheartened to see a lot of candidates either miss this deadline or don't bother. And I think that's something people should take into consideration as well. Did your candidate think that it was worth submitting to this official document, state document, for you to get information? But jumping back maybe to the way that these votes are counted. So what I remember, a couple of things from being on the county council is especially kind of in this, I would say, rising age of sort of election denialism and some of the questions, people would say there should be an audit. Is there an audit?
There's multiple audits.
There are multiple audits. Yes.
Audits going on all the time, from
accuracy, which you talked about.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
To fiscal audits, you name it, from countywide to from the state. I am being audited constantly. And frankly, I encourage it because I want to make sure people understand what I'm doing, how I'm doing it, and feel safe and secure that their vote is counted.
Yes. And then the votes are ultimately approved by, I think this will maybe be news to some, not everyone, because we have so many smart listeners, but they're ultimately approved not by you.
No.
They're approved by a board of canvassers. And who is the board of canvassers across our state? Who serves in those roles?
Sure. So the board of canvassers for Salt Lake County is, of course, the Salt Lake County Council. For other jurisdictions, for other counties, it's going to be their county commission or their county council. But they convene, they review it. In fact, I encourage them to be part of the process before they certify the election. And they certify it, and then it goes up to the Lieutenant Governor's office, who reviews it, especially for the multi-county races. And the Lieutenant Governor is the final say.
Yeah.
Lannie, I'm very interested in all of the odd things you get. Like when I do my ballot, I'm like, where it has check, do I fill in the circle? If I put an X, if I put a check. My husband and I are sending it to the same place. Maybe we can put it in the same envelope, save the postage. Maybe you vote and then you decide, I want to change my vote. What do you do with all the exceptions of human nature that show up on the ballot?
Part of this job is definitely understanding the human brain. And it's so fascinating to see not just when people vote, but how people vote, too. We have those that will vote early, and then there's typically a lull. And then, like Christmas shoppers, we see a mad dash at the end, too. But as far as the questions about if you change your mind, cross it out, make sure your intent is well known. I've seen people...
The machine will kick them out.
Absolutely.
And then they're looked at by hand.
They are looked at by a team of 2 people. That is adjudication. They are adjudicated to make sure that the voter intent is well known. If the team does not agree, then it goes up to a higher level until it comes up to me. It's never happened where we weren't able to agree what the voter's intent was.
You ever reach out to the voter?
By the time that we're looking at the ballot, we cannot tell who the voter is. That adds to the constitutional
that was a trick
right.
Question.
Yes.
That was a trick question.
To the secrecy of the ballot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So one of the questions I had asked Sherry when she was in the role was to come back and tell us sometimes ballots aren't counted. And you mentioned, Natalie, can you put 2 in the same ballot sleeve? Give us some of the reasons the ballots are rejected.
Sure. Ballot will be rejected if it's too late. So we all know about what happened down in Iron County and Washington County during the primary with the statutory deadline to have the postmark date of the day before Election Day. If it's postmarked after that, statutorily, we cannot count those ballots. That's a majority of them. We do get some double stuffed, as I call them. They're not an Oreo, but an envelope. Every single envelope is unique to that voter. If you look at your yellow envelope, you'll see there's a 9-digit code next to your voter ID. That 9-digit code is not just specific to you, the voter, or this election. It's specific to that ballot and that ballot envelope. So let's say your cat ate your ballot. I've heard crazier things. I will cancel that ballot and issue you a new one with a new 9-digit code. If I see that old one, it will kick out of my system because I know not to count that one.
Yeah, the cat apparently was supposed to have eaten it. Any other things that people should be careful of when they're voting? And then can you tell them how they can track their ballot?
Absolutely. Be careful. Make sure you assign your ballot. If you have any questions about what your signature looks like, sign it the way you would normally sign something. I have access to the driver's license division signatures. I have access to your former affidavits on envelopes, your party registration form. I probably have more documents signed by you than you probably do at this point.
So signature is really important.
Signature is very important.
That's a real important message to the young listeners because you're still kind of forming your signature, and find a standard and stick to it.
Absolutely. But you know what? If your signature doesn't match for whatever reason, I will let you know within 24 hours. I'll send you
My husband's
a letter.
had that. Yeah.
I will call you. I will text you if I have a good phone number for you. I will email you. Short of sending you a courier pigeon, I will do whatever it takes to make sure that we can count your ballot.
Yeah. Well, I really value that. And I just hope that listeners feel the empowerment and opportunity that, my experience with clerks across party lines is that they are typically passionate about access to the ballot, access to democracy, the democratic process more broadly. And I hope they're open to transparency. I know we've had some problems across our state. And I would just ask voters to really think seriously about what a critical role this is in our government. And I thank you for your service in this role. And to the clerks out there listening, I don't know if we have other listeners, but it's a really important role.
Yeah, and it's such an important year, and the peaceful transition of power looms large on all of our minds. It's something that we just assumed a few election cycles ago, and we don't anymore. I mentioned to Shireen off air that I went and heard Liz Cheney speak when she was in town, and she drew upon the speech of Al Gore. It's from December 13th, 2000, and in the speech he said this. He said, and of course this is Hanging Chads, George W. Bush versus Al Gore. This is December 13th, so you think how long it's been since the election and the Supreme Court ruled. This is what he said in his speech. He said, "Now the U.S. Supreme Court has spoken. Let there be no doubt. While I strongly disagree with the court's decision, I accept it. I accept the finality of this outcome, which will be ratified next Monday in the Electoral College. And tonight, for the sake of our unity, for the sake of our unity of the people and the strength of our democracy, I offer my concession." Wow.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's impactful.
He goes on to say, "I also accept my responsibility, which I will unconditionally discharge, to honor the new president-elect and do everything possible to help him bring Americans together in fulfillment of a vision."
Yeah.
We've changed a lot since then.
Yeah.
And our election process, it's one of these institutions that you could argue is being challenged. Shireen and I often talk about institutions in decline, even if they're not really in decline, but perceptions of them being in decline. And I think what I've learned in this, segment is that there's a lot that goes into our voting system.
Yeah, there's a lot. And I just want to reiterate to people, the importance of these roles, the importance of professionalism, and then also thinking about the way that these ultimately come up. Each county, your county commissioners or your county council, is the one that is approving the count of these votes. And I think it's really important that people pay attention to what's happening at that Board of Canvassers meeting that usually convenes, I think it's 2 weeks, right? They have 2 weeks for the canvass after the election to certify the results of the election. This is where we really see, does our democracy work?
Yeah. Lannie, is there a point when this is all done that you and your team have a toast or have dinner together and just say, another good election accomplished, we did our job?
We do. We have a potluck after every successful election, and albeit every single election has been successful and will continue to be successful because of the true heroes I have working with me and the importance we put on making sure that we're administering a free and fair election.
And if you don't have confidence in the election system, real briefly, what do you tell our listeners? If there's someone who's questioning it, what can they do?
Call your clerk. Come take a tour. Come understand the system.
Ask your questions.
Ask your questions and
Be an
keep asking
eyewitness to
until you get
something.
them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's wonderful. Well, thank you so much for being here with us. And
Yeah. Lannie, I really appreciate your time. Shireen, always good to be with you. The program is Both Sides of the Aisle. We thank our producer, Anthony Skoma, and thanks everyone for listening.
Don't forget to vote.